Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are jumping right into an incredibly tense, defining moment in American history, the very eve of the Civil War. By digging into Jefferson Davis's inaugural address and looking at the foundation of the Confederacy, we can actually uncover the raw, unfiltered motivations behind secession. It is going to be a fascinating look at the past, so let's get started. To set the stage for us, I want to share a warning from Isaiah chapter 10, verse 1, "Woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees." We're starting right here because it perfectly establishes the moral stakes of our explainer today. History is essentially a record of human choices and the laws we make. So keep this incredibly powerful warning in the back of your mind as we analyze the foundations of the Confederacy. Here is our quick roadmap for this explainer. First up, the Confederate vision. Second, defending secession. Third, a call to arms. And finally, we'll wrap up with morality and education. Okay, part one, the Confederate vision, justifying a new government. Think about it for a second. When you're stepping up to lead a completely breakaway nation, you absolutely need a rock-solid public argument to explain yourself. So you might be wondering, what was Davis's primary justification for secession? Well, his inaugural address really had three massive tasks on its plate. First, he had to justify leaving the Union. Second, he needed to rally support for this brand new government. And third, and this is absolutely crucial, he needed to frame secession not as some violent rebellion, but as a peaceful, legal, and constitutional right. Moving right along to part two, defending secession, the why behind the Confederacy. Whenever leaders want to legitimize a new, radical movement, they almost always try to tie themselves to respected historical figures. It's a classic move. So how exactly did Davis connect the Confederacy to the original American founding fathers? It's really interesting. Davis argued that the Confederacy wasn't rejecting the past at all. In fact, he claimed it was built directly on the founders' original principles. But there was a major revision. He claimed the original Constitution needed much stronger, far more explicit protections for states' rights. Now, we have to be super precise here. In the specific context of Davis's speech, states' rights meant one thing above all else, protecting state sovereignty specifically to maintain the institution of slavery. This brings up a huge question. When historical debates throw around the term states' rights, it is essential that we go straight to the primary sources. We have to ask, what specific rights were actually being defended? What exact role did slavery play in this inaugural speech? The historical record is very clear on this. Davis explicitly framed the Confederacy as an entity designed specifically to protect a state's right to keep slavery. This wasn't some hidden subtext you have to read between the lines to find. It was literally the central, foundational argument of his entire public justification.
Let's dive into part three, a call to arms, ready for independence.
Picture the scene. Davis is speaking to a fractured, highly tense region that is taking an unprecedented step. So what did he urge Southerners to actually do in that moment? His directive was crystal clear. First, he urged citizens to stand united. Second, he told them to be ready to defend their independence because, despite all his claims of a peaceful secession, he knew conflict was highly likely. And finally, he sought legitimacy. The new Confederacy desperately needed foreign nations to look at them and recognize them as a valid, independent country. Now, remember, history doesn't just happen in a vacuum. While Davis is declaring all of this down in the South, Abraham Lincoln is up in the North with a completely different perspective. So how did Davis's vision differ from Lincoln's? To truly grasp why the Civil War started, we really have to look at how these two opposing viewpoints just crashed into each other. This right here illustrates the central conflict. Davis claimed secession was just a peaceful, legal right. But the reality of a secession explicitly built on preserving slavery fundamentally opposed Lincoln's ultimate goal of preserving the Union. Because these two visions were completely irreconcilable, finding any sort of compromise became absolutely impossible. Which brings us to part four, morality and education, the philosophical takeaway. Education without morality will hurt. That's a core philosophy we talk about a lot. Think about it. Jefferson Davis was a highly educated, deeply intelligent man who was more than capable of crafting complex legal arguments. But intelligence is inherently destructive if it's used to justify oppressive systems and make bad moral choices. Romans 8, verses 6 through 7, says, "The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the spirit is life and peace." When we look back at the sweep of history, we constantly see the immense destruction caused when leaders are governed by worldly power and oppressive systems rather than spiritual morality. Integrating biblical morality with our education is exactly how we equip ourselves to avoid repeating the tragic, destructive mistakes of the past. So let's bring this all together. Why is Jefferson Davis's speech so critical for understanding the Civil War? Why do we spend time parsing his exact words? Well, 3 big reasons. First, it reveals the Confederacy's true self-view, directly from its leader, not from historians writing decades later. Second, it exposes exactly why compromise failed. By tying their government explicitly to slavery, they drew a hard line in the sand. And third, it shows us precisely why the Civil War became totally inevitable. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. How does understanding Davis's explicit defense of slavery help us comprehend why war was inevitable? When we look back at Isaiah's warning against unjust laws, it becomes pretty clear how a foundation built on oppression really leaves no room for peace. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep asking those great questions, and I will see you next time.